How many jobs did your parents have on average?
My dad had one.
Yeah, my dad had 2. The average millennial is going to have 15 jobs in their career.
With rapid innovation and evolving technologies, the shelf life of skills in today's job market is no longer measured in decades, but in years, and sometimes even months.
That is a fundamental shift that education has just not wrapped its head around. We're seeing the impact of that. We're seeing degree enrollments drop. Student debt is higher than it's ever been.
My guest today is Gautam Tambe, and he believes he can transform education to fit this new professional landscape and ultimately make learning accessible to all.
I envision a future where people are going to consume transformational, career-changing learning multiple times in their career.
And coming up later in the show, we will visit Gautam's startup, Springboard, to see how it's making an impact not only on students and employees, but on employers as well.
If somebody's going to have 10 jobs in their career, a company's better off if they can figure out a way that 6 of those 10 are going to be at that same company.
Stick with us as we see if it's actually possible to transform education to fit our world today. The only way to solve our biggest problems is to have the audacity to try. Welcome to In the Arena with Evan Baer.
Gautam, awesome to have you in conversation. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to get a deep dive into Springboard, what the company does, a history of that. I'd love for you to explain a little bit on why the time in a job is so short. Help me understand the millennial who every, 18 months or something is changing jobs. Are they can't focus and they can't endure at one company long enough? What's happening with those people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's 2 factors, right? The shelf life of skills is truly dropped, right? Just the rate of innovation, the rate at which especially technology is changing is objectively greater than it was 3 decades ago. And there is just a lot more liquidity in the marketplace. So, 30 years ago, you were at Oracle, you hated your job. What did you do? You typed up a resume, you put it in an envelope, and you mailed it to 10 different places, right? Different world. And those 2 things in concert means that this idea that you'll consume all your education up until you're 25 or 30 and then you're set for your career is just gone.
Several years ago when you were starting Springboard, what were you hearing from employers? What are they saying about the ability to access skilled labor and upskill their workers?
Yeah, so this is the sort of great travesty, right? On one hand, and I've always said, talent is evenly distributed, opportunity is not. That's one of the reasons we exist. One of the greatest travesties of what we saw when we were starting Springboard was we had, on one hand, tons of people who had the talent but not the skills, including many people who had degrees. 45% of people with college degrees were underemployed when we were looking at these stats in 2013 when we started. On the other hand, we talked to employers and we'd hear, we cannot hire data scientists fast enough. We cannot find UX designers. We cannot find people with these skills, right? And that was a failing of the system, where there were people who really wanted these jobs, didn't have the skills, they had the talent, and there were employers who literally were, sort of fighting each other for a small pool of talent instead of trying to expand the pie. I view Springboard as a market maker, right? And where we say, we can come in and say, there's a skills gap. And as a human cost to the skills gap, right? It means that for a lot of individuals, it leads to less fulfilling lives than they could have. And on the other hand, for a lot of employers, there's an economic cost to it. For a lot of employers, they are not able to move as quickly as they would like and create the productivity they would like from the organization. And we decided to come in and say, we're going to solve and bridge this gap. And so our mission is to bridge the world skills gap.
Fast forward to today, give me a sketch of what Springboard looks like today.
We've set for ourselves an ambitious goal of transforming 1 million lives by 2030. And that means we are bigger and have more resources, so that comes with more responsibility. And so we're a few different ways now in which we work to bridge the world skills gap. The first and the core is still our Springboard branded, long form, 6 to 9 month long intensive career track programs that help you transition from outside of the tech industry into the tech industry. Right? So you could be, when COVID happened, we saw, for example, a lot of people on Broadway and a lot of baristas and a lot of people in the service industry not have jobs, and many of them took Springboard programs and found their way into careers in software engineering, in data analytics. So that's still the core. We also started, to the point about universities, if you'd asked me when we started Springboard, So I thought mistakenly that, and it was call it the hubris of an early stage entrepreneur. I was like, it's us versus the universities. And it really is not, right? Really, what I have come to learn and really accept is the universities play a tremendous role in the ecosystem, and they have so much trust, and they have so many good assets that if we can play a part in helping them move into the future, we should view that as an honor. And so that was a big change, and my co-founder saw it before I did, so credit to her. But we started talking to universities, and they said, we want to do more of these non-degree credentials. We want to offer more job-oriented tech programs, but we don't quite know how, right? And we also knew that there was a segment of people who, when they are spending money on education, it's really important to them to have that university credential. And instead of fighting that, we said, why don't we lean into that? So we now work with universities to power their programs in areas like machine learning, in software engineering, and giving their audiences access to really high quality Springboard programs with that one-on-one industry mentor, the career services, all that good stuff. So that's the second area where we work. And then the third thing we are doing, and really where I see a lot of our investment in the future, is working with employers. The cost of the skills gap is ultimately borne by employers. And the savvy ones know it. Because you can't move as fast as you want to. And I believe employers need to play a much bigger role in education than they have.
So it's clear that workers face a really different reality over the last 30 years, that we're changing jobs much more frequently, and the need to upskill, reskill is imminent. What's happened during this period of time with higher ed and our traditional education system? Has it changed at all?
Not nearly at the pace that I believe is needed for this new economy. And I think this idea that the way to have a successful, comfortable life, that path needs to go through a 4-year college degree, which sort of became popular in the 70s and 80s, and we sort of kept building upon that. I just don't know if that's true anymore, right? And universities, for a variety of reasons, haven't necessarily embraced or adapted to this new reality as quickly as I believe is in their best interest. Now, there are universities who have realized that, and I think if you talk to provosts and presidents at universities who are facing this, and they see this, and they're all really smart people, they know that they need to figure out ways to expand their portfolios to have not just degree offerings, but also non-degree offerings and shorter alternative credentials. That's happening. And we work with a number of universities to enable that. Is it happening at a pace that I'd like to see? Not quite.
You guys set out to change education. Many people that set out to do that, they might become educators themselves, they might go to a university, they might go into public policy or politics to try to reform how things are funded. You built a company, you raised venture capital, you hired engineers. Talk a little bit about choosing the vehicle of the for-profit venture-backed startup as your method, your mode of driving change.
The speed at which a for-profit entity can operate and make change, despite some of the shortcomings, right, is what the sector needed. And so really it was a choice about speed.
Why would the structure of a company or the kind of capital a company has relate to how fast it can move?
Well, what do you need for speed, right? You need independence, relative independence. And there, I believe that for-profit companies, at least for-profit startups, have greater independence than a not-for-profit at the same stage that in general will have sort of more parties who have different interests, right? So there's an alignment of interests that leads to speed. I do think capital is an enabler of also hiring great talent. And I do think great talent results in better execution.
Why is it that universities have been incredibly slow to adapt to the changing needs of their graduates? I mean, we're talking about their capital sources, right? It's alumni donations and maybe federal grants.
Yeah.
Talk about the talent that they have, probably not A+ Silicon Valley talent who's designing the future of their programs. Internal interests, right? The engineering faculty that's been teaching the same way for 30 years, probably pretty resistant to take on a lot of new things. So do you see yourselves, or what do you see when you're kind of competing with universities or now partnering with universities that speaks to how a startup is able to operate in a way that, like, for example, a university would not be able to operate?
Yeah, there are some things that are structural, right? So universities have long operated in this idea of the semester, and then every year you've got a new class coming in. We change curriculum every month, or we have the ability to change curriculum every month because we start a cohort every month, right? So I think there's a speed that comes with it. I also think that the universities have, for the most part, this does good, a lot of governance, because there's a lot of responsibility, there's public funding that they're taking on, and I do believe that all of the sort of governance and checks and balances can, in certain areas, really slow them down.
Right.
Right. And so then that's where we found universities come to us and say, why don't we partner? Because there are areas that you're going to be innovating faster on, but we want to bring that into the system, right? So that's why I think I don't see this as, should they change those structures? I don't know. The amount of federal funding that goes to universities, I do believe there's good reason.
Education is one of the few industries, maybe the only one that I can think of, where being a for-profit company can just be perceived as being suspect. Do you get pushback? Why are you so greedy, profiting on the backs of these young employees that are just trying to get ahead in their life?
Yeah. One of the things we do is we put our money where our mouth is. Because I do believe one of the reasons why for-profit education has gotten a bad rap is because of a misalignment in incentives. And what happened with some of the for-profit universities, especially, right, is there was a misincentive where the universities would profit from tuition dollars. Those tuition dollars were funded via Title IV federal loan programs, and students would end up racking debt regardless of the quality of the program and the outcome they had. So one thing we've done to counter that is, and really align our incentives with our students' incentives, is have, for all of our career-changing programs, what is called a tuition refund guarantee. So if, as a student, you come into our program and you do all the things that we ask you to do, including complete the program, complete a project, go to all your mentor calls, apply to a certain number of jobs, and if you still don't get a job within a certain amount of time of graduation, we'll refund your entire tuition.
And what's the take rate on that?
Like low single-digit %.
Yeah.
Like we've had tens of thousands of people come through our programs over the last few years. We've had dozens of people who've taken job guarantee refunds.
You mentioned something about satisfaction or feeling kind of fully fulfilled in the work. Obviously, helping people earn more income is a big piece of what you're working on. At the founding stage, was there a motivation here around helping people be more fulfilled in their work in addition to earning more?
When we started, we were a bit naive, right? And I come from a family of educators. 3 of my grandparents were teachers. Both of my parents have been teachers at different points in their career. My co-founder had her own journey coming into education, but we got together and we said, education's broken, let's help fix it, right? We didn't quite know how, but we just felt this strong urge to fix what we saw was broken. We sort of had this whole journey where the first product we put out, believe it or not, was a search engine for online learning content. Kind of like a Yelp for online learning. This is 2013, so Coursera, Udacity, Udemy, LinkedIn Learning, which was at the time lynda.com, Pluralsight, were just taking off. So it was clear to us that the future of learning is online. My co-founder, in fact, she'd taken one of the first courses on Coursera, and she was trying to learn machine learning for her job at IBM Research. And she had a 2-year-old at the time, and she was able to do this course while having a 90-minute commute each way and having a kid at home. And she was like, this is the future of education. I want to help build it. So the first product was, there's a lot of great content online. Let's just help organize it. And we quickly realized that people didn't care for search. They cared for curation. The query was not, show me the best course to learn Python. The query was, I want to be a data scientist. What do I even learn? Can you give me a path from point A to point B? So we'd indexed all this content, right? So we said, okay, why don't we start creating these things called learning pathways, which is essentially a playlist or a curriculum. If you want to be a software engineer, go do these 25 things in this sequence. And if you do all of them, you'll have the skills you need to become a data scientist or a software engineer. that was really popular. So we went from having basically no users ever on the search engine to having 100,000 registered users in a span of 4 months with just 4 of these curricula. And then we realized lots of people are signing up, nobody's completing. So we spent the summer of 2014 talking to a couple hundred of our users and asked them what's going on. Coffee shops, on Skype calls, there was no Zoom back then. And if I could summarize all those conversations in one sentence, it was, I need human support. I get stuck, I lose motivation, I wish I had someone to talk to, it's lonely to study online. And that was, I would say, one of the first aha moments we had and became one of the most important founding insights behind Springboard, which was that most of what had happened in online learning up until that point was people putting content online, right? Udemy is a really good discount bookstore. Pluralsight is a fantastic library. And in the offline world, you don't send someone to a library or a bookstore and say, go become a data scientist. So why would we expect that to work online?
Right.
And so that was the time when we said, okay, everyone's building libraries, we're going to build a school. And that's sort of when we said, okay, and what does that take? And the first hypothesis we had is, what if we paired every single student with a mentor from the industry who worked with them every week on a video call, same time every week, creates accountability, gives them feedback, gives them inspiration. And we saw completion rates go from like 5% to 55%. And it was a small pilot, and that was successful. And that sort of then became, with that we said, okay, this is working. And with some short courses, we launched with that one-on-one weekly mentorship. And through that, we realized about half the people who were coming to these programs and paying $1,000 for a 2-month course were finding ways to transition careers. I started getting phone calls from our students who we knew by name at the time because we were small, and saying, I got a job at Reddit because, and my mentor from Springboard referred me to the position, and guess what? All they wanted to talk about in the interview was my Springboard capstone project. And I was like, wait a second. And so as he started coming in, we were like, wow, we started out thinking we wanted to transform education, but what was happening is we were transforming lives. And that felt we sat with that. We were like, this is bigger than what we had envisioned doing, and also a bigger responsibility. And so we really that's when we reframed what we were, and that led to the launch of our flagship career track programs, which are longer, more intensive, have all the career support, come with a tuition reimbursement guarantee if you don't get a job. And so that was really how it. So it's a long answer to your question of were we always no, we sort of stumbled our way.
Let's take a break from our discussion to see what Springboard is doing today.
Welcome to Springboard's headquarters here in downtown San Francisco. We actually moved into these offices about 2 months ago. And you can see we have a couple of our colleagues working right now. Some of our great neon signs, like always learning and humanists. Students come to us to have their careers transformed. And so we want to make sure that we're giving them the best experience for them to not only learn these skills, but also to retain these skills and be able to demonstrate them so that they can land that job into whatever industry that they've chosen.
Designing an online curriculum for an online school is a little bit different than a traditional on-ground model in that we really have to keep on our toes with making sure that what we create is engaging and make sure that it's both relevant and highly applicable to what they're doing day to day. One of the ways we do this is by having in-depth interviews with a lot of hiring managers from different companies with whom we partner. So having the firsthand insight into what strikes you as competitive, what makes you stand out as a candidate in comparison to other people who might be applying for that very same job. We also do a lot of student interviews to make sure that everything we're creating is really responsive and relevant to the unique needs and challenges of being an employee in today's workforce in different types of fields. Really, what we do at Springboard is make sure that we're architecting the optimal path in between where you want to end up and where you are, and making sure that we have all of the support necessary to bridge the gap in between those two places.
The experience that we want our students to have is a very holistic one. We want the student to be able to engage in all the different modalities and in all the different ways that they can. And so it is part curriculum on a web app, quizzes, assessments, things like that. But it's also being able to work through some problems with your mentor. Maybe you'll ask a mentor hey, have you witnessed this before? How did you do it in your specific company? Motivation's a big piece too. And so having a student advisor that can really be a therapist to you through the ups and downs of your journey, and then also connecting to a career coach. It's part of that holistic experience that we want our students to have at Springboard.
This amount of support given to Springboard students is allowing many people to upskill and transition careers while working full-time.
We are now working with Amazon and Walmart to take their frontline stuff, whether it's warehouse workers, whether it's cashiers, and over the course of 6 or 9 months, help them transition into entry-level software jobs, entry-level data jobs.
People like Cleo, an Amazon Go employee, hoping to expand her existing knowledge.
I came 3 years ago from El Salvador. I have a career in IT area, so I decided that I want to do something else to grow up my knowledge. The maximum motivator that I want to be in the IT area in Amazon.
After a full day, including exercise, meal prep, and work, Cleo then turns to her Springboard lessons.
I have a long day, and I like from Springboard that I can choose the time during the day that is gonna be better to me to do the course. And I learned from Springboard that they said, I'm flexible. If you don't have time today, we can reschedule for tomorrow, but we have to do it during the week. Springboard is giving you the opportunity to, if you want to learn something new, you want to keep in track with the new technology, nobody can stop you. If you want to do something, do it. Just do it.
What the companies we're working with have realized, if you can take somebody who starts out in the warehouse and then ends up at a desk job and rises through the ranks, there's a value to that context that those employees bring over time. And I would argue that if you've got an Amazon engineering manager in 7 years who came out of an Ivy League and went straight into an engineering job and rose through the ranks versus somebody who started at the warehouse, didn't have a college degree, and then went into engineering and rose through the ranks, I would argue that that second person is gonna bring some things to the table. A customer empathy, a user empathy, an understanding of the overall operation that the first person doesn't bring. And that's really valuable to the organization. If I'm running Amazon, I want those people.
And what did you learn about how to motivate people to complete this journey? You mentioned at the gate, it was often the case that people would sign up, but the completion rate of just navigating the courses on your own was really low. What do people need to carry out this vision that got them to the table, but to actually get across the finish line?
Yeah, it is. I view our jobs as educators to provide a balance of challenge and support. And you need to know which one to lean into when, because people need both. To complete anything that's challenging and hard, right? And learning a new skill is hard. Learning a new skill while you're holding down a full-time job, you might have kids, and doing this 20 hours a week, nights and weekends, which is what a lot of our students do, is even harder, right? Because when you're exhausted at the end of a long day, you've gone to work, you've put your kids to bed, it's like 8 p.m. We're not competing with other education companies, we're competing with Netflix. And so it really sort of providing that right balance of challenge and support is something we found really important. The human support really, really matters. People do their best work when they are accountable to somebody they like and respect. Especially like early in your career, when some of the best things I did were when I really liked the professor and I respected them, when I really liked my boss and I respected them. That would push me to work harder. And I think that human component is just really crucial and irreplaceable, even in the age of AI. I'll go on record and say that.
I'm curious what you've learned about what beyond giving skills to your students has become important to you guys. I think about, we're both graduates of top business school programs. If you were trying to learn Excel modeling, you would take training the street. You would not go spend 200 grand in 2 years at late night socializing, which was a lot of my time in business school. In that modality, building friendships, building relationships was a huge piece of that educational experience. We know that you're imparting them skills. What else are you trying to equip your students with beyond the hard skills?
Yeah, one of the skills that is really underrated at most educational programs, including the universities we went to, is the job search skill. So, when people come to our programs, one of the things we tell them is, we'll teach you not just the technical skills you need to do the job, but also the skills you need to land the job. And those are not always the same. And universities and career centers do historically not a great job of that. And in a world where you're gonna have 15 jobs in your career, you better know how to look for a job.
one of your main jobs becomes looking for a job.
Yeah, which wasn't the case for our parents, right? You got into one thing and then you were set.
Right.
So a lot of our program focuses on telling your story, presenting yourself well, really thinking about, sometimes some things that'll seem seemingly basic. Like people will apply to 3 jobs and say, I didn't get a job. My job search was a failure. It's a funnel. Apply to a certain number of jobs a week. Let's help you figure out which jobs to apply to. Let's surface them for you. Let's help you prepare for every interview. All those things are crucial. So that's a big thing that we preach in addition to the technical skills. People do graduate out of our programs with lifelong relationships, sometimes with their peers, often with their mentor. The industry mentor is a game changer. So a student will graduate our design program. It's 39 weeks long, so 9 months long, having spoken to a mentor from the industry who'd be a designer at a place like Airbnb or Dropbox for 39 weeks in a row. Right? I didn't have that at the Ivy League business school I went to. Right? Talking to somebody in the industry every week who's got your back, who walks the walk, talks the talk, it's inspiring. It also gives so much, when people graduate our programs, they know what this job looks like because they've talked to somebody who's had the job for 39 weeks in a row. And so that's a game-changing feature of our programs that really instills confidence. And a lot of students have gone on to say they've built lifelong relationships with their mentors.
How do you personally pursue sort of growing your own skill set or your own toolkit? I find with tech tools, I'll try to take maybe 30 minutes a few times a week, spend time on Product Hunt, look at the new stuff coming out, download the app, install it, run it, learn it, just to sort of stay sharp on my own so that I don't get surpassed. Do you take some of your own classes, or how do you do it personally?
Yeah, it is. I find one of the great things about my job, being a founder CEO, is the reward for doing my job really well over a period of time is that I start sucking in my job because the job changes. Right. So I've gone through these periods where I'm like, I'm doing really well, and then suddenly I'm like, wait a second, I'm not performing as well anymore. What's going on? And it's because the job is different. Like the job of running a 200-person company is not the same as the job of running a 50-person company. Yeah. So I've had to sort of do what we preach to our students is this idea of like reinvent yourselves as often as you need to because you're going to have multiple jobs. So I've had the same title for the last 10 years, but I would say I've had at least 4 to 5 distinct jobs. And for me, I think one of the things that I really deeply believe is everyone learns differently. One of the great things about actually online learning in our model is that it gives a lot of flexibility. You choose your own project, you choose your own hours. If a video is not quite effective at teaching you something, you might go find an article and we'll help you surface that'll help you explain it better because maybe you learn better in reading. So to that point, what works really well for me is learning from other humans. That's what works really well for me. And then I'll geek out on a subject, I'll read a bunch, but then I'll just try to find people who know a lot more about something than I do.
Well, the most recent nuclear bomb in the space, I'm assuming, is AI, GPT-4.
Yeah.
So some might say, shoot, all these entry-level data jobs that you have trained all these people for, are about to all go away. Give us some of your context on how are you seeing AI impact the kind of workers that you're training?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are going through a massive transformation right now. And I like to remind people that it's not the first time that the world's gone through a transformation of this nature, and perhaps even of this magnitude, right? The Industrial Revolution was one. I think if you looked at what the media was saying at the time of the Industrial Revolution, there's this fear that nobody's going to have work anymore. And so I always like to say that AI is not going to take your job, but somebody who knows how to use AI better than you might.
There is a view of work fairly prevalent today that work is it's a bummer. We'd love to automate it away. It might be a world where a huge swath of the population is on UBI, Universal Basic Income, and that AI and machines would make work something of the past. What do you see as the role of work? And is it just something that we hope gets automated away?
There's a segment of human beings, maybe it's not the entire population, but a large segment of human beings has always been driven to find fulfillment through self-improvement and improving the world around them, in however they define that improvement, right? And through progress. Like as human beings, we need progress. And if that weren't the case, we'd all still be very satisfied being cavemen and cavewomen, right? So I think, there might be, I think human beings are going to find ways to keep themselves challenged and motivated, because I think that's just inherent to the human experience. So we may automate away plenty of tasks that we think of as work right now, and then we'll find something else to do.
Tell me a little bit about when you think about imagining where work is going to go, what advice are you giving to, let's say to high school kids today that are thinking maybe college, maybe straight into the workforce, imagining a career starting in 5 to 10 years. How would you cast a vision for them on what you think their careers will look like?
Yeah. The most important thing I'd say is truly be open-minded to where your learning comes from. You're going to have to learn and reinvent yourself multiple times over. I couldn't tell my son what are the possible jobs he could have at 25, because I can't predict the world 22 years out. So what can I tell him? Be resilient, always be learning, and be willing to reinvent yourself. And as far as things like college are concerned, we're not saving for college. I truly do believe that by the time my son's 18, college will be optional for him, and he could still have a great career with or without college, just like driving will be optional for him. I think we've all accepted at this point that in 15 years, actually driving your own car is going to be optional. But I think college will be too. And how do you prepare for that world? And how do you prepare for a world where you're sort of crafting your own journey a lot more? That's the world that I would advise people to prepare for.